Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste. My name is Shri Hari Vittal. Let us begin with a prayer. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our quest session. We have Nrithya Jagannathan with us today. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to have an interview with you. I would like to introduce you for the benefit of our audience. Nrithya Jagannathan ji is a senior yoga therapist from the Krishnamacharya tradition. With over 19 years of teaching experience, she is currently the director of KYM Institute of Yoga Studies, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, Chennai. This is the training and certification wing of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. She has traveled extensively around the world to teach yoga and Vedic chanting and is a certified therapist from the International Association of Yoga Therapists. A classical Bharatanatyam dancer and choreographer, Nrithya ji has over 3 decades of experience in dance and has performed extensively all over the world. She's passionate about Indian culture and yoga philosophy. She's also the editor-in-chief of Darshana, the quarterly journal on yoga and yoga chikitsa of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandira. Once again, thank you so much, Nrithya ji, for joining us. The very first question we usually ask all our guests is, could you please share about your journey in yoga and spirituality? How did it all start? What were the events that led to you choosing to take this path? And also what has been a source of motivation through this journey?
Namaskaram, first of all, and thank you for having me here on Quest. If I had to speak of my journey, honestly, I would say I have been blessed. Every step of the way, I have been fortunate, I could say, to be in the right place at the right time. My early formative education was in the Krishnamurti Foundation, the school in Chennai. And I think in many ways, who I am, what I do today comes from those seeds. Very early in my life, I also was very interested in learning dance. And so my dance journey started when I was 7 with my Natyacharya, Srimati Krishna Kumari Narendran, a very well-known exponent of the Pandanallur tradition. And I was very lucky in that that was a time when we would call her Akka. And so she was teaching us directly and hands-on. And it was a time when there were a lot of performances. We were traveling all the time. And so within a very few years, I was a part of her troupe, traveling extensively to perform. And she gave me a solid orientation to the temple culture, to our traditions, to festivals, to stories. And because when she would choreograph any number, she would tell us the story and who the characters involved were and what was the learning that you had to get from it. And I think deep down that triggered in me this fascination for our culture, for Sanatana culture. And that only grew over the years. As I grew along with my Natyacharya, I must say that she opened my eyes to the compositions of many Vagyakaras, because with her we've touched so many compositions. We worked on the Shivananda Lahari, we worked on compositions of Tyagaraja Swami, of Muthuswami Dikshidhar, Shyama Shastri, Subramanya Bharati, Swati Tirunal Maharaja, Uttukada Venkata Subbayar. We've done full-length productions on these. I have worked with her on group productions that she did for me, for others, on the Abhirami Andadi, on the Purana stories of Ganesha, and it's just a huge repertoire, the Thirumandiram, so in different languages. And she would also explore very unusual, at that point of time, unusual because traditionally dance follows a certain pathway. and you have a certain margam, certain compositions, and sometimes she would explore the boundaries of that with other compositions of, say, Surdas or Kabir, and it was a very eclectic mix of numbers of songs, and I was with her through choreography, through orchestra rehearsals, through teaching. In many ways, I would say that became the base. And there was a point in my life where I was living across the road from her. And so I was literally in dance class all the time. When I was not studying, I was in class. And I think that made a big role. It introduced me to a lot of people, of resources, and instilled in me the desire to understand, to delve deeper. That developed over time. And here I must say my parents also supported that interest through my career choices, because while I could have opted for something that allowed me to go into a science stream, I think at every juncture I had advice, because I wanted to opt for chemistry, but the HOD in the college that I applied to said, no, see, if you're interested in dance and taking that up passionately, then I don't think you should be here. You should look for a course that gives you more time. And so my path changed. I went into business administration, and then my interest has always been in writing. I think that has been nurtured from a very young age. Again, I must attribute it to my teachers in the school. And so, because I was always interested in reading, you'd never see me without a book in my hand. And so little by little, I moved into communication, which was my master's. And again, a lot of things in my life have been serendipity, because when I was working on my MA thesis, which was on song and dance, the spectacle of song and dance in Tamil cinema, especially focusing on the 90s cinemas, I was researching on this. And then I just happened to meet a gentleman at one of the bookstores, and he was watching me, apparently, elderly gentleman. And then he said, yeah, I have someone that I'd like you to meet. And see, we were speaking 90s, late 90s. I'm just about 20. So, and then he said, I'd like you to come with me to meet Vijay Bhai in Pondicherry. Vijay Bhai was the head then of the Aurobindo Society. And so naturally, my parents were a little skeptical. And so my dad actually accompanied me on that journey. But then I met Vijay Bhai. That was again a turning point, because he gave me a role. I was studying then, I was doing my master's, but he gave me the task of working on a project as a project research associate on classical dance. And for the Aurobindo Society, that project ran for about 4 years. And so that gave me an opportunity to travel across India. I met some of the greatest legends, Kelucharan, Mohapatra, Birju Maharajji. I met Srimati Kanakarele, all over. I went all over India. Srimati Mrinalini Sarabhai. So meeting them, interviewing them, taking their insights. And I think that was another turning point in my life. And so all this came together when I finished my master's. Again, these are one of those little nudges in my life that have just happened. I answered an ad. Very reluctantly, there was an ad from the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, which was asking for copy editors. And they had set the age limit at 28 and above. I was about 21, just about 21 then. And I dismissed the ad. My mother said, just try it. You're out of college now. Just attempt it, so that you know what you have to do in an interview. Doesn't mean that you have to get a job, but just face the interview so that you know. And so that was the reason I went, and then that's the reason I'm here. It's almost 21 years later that I'm now at the KYM. It's been a lovely journey. I've always been interested in yoga and culture. And as I was working, very soon I joined the KYM's diploma course. So between 2003, it started. That's when the course began, 2003, 2004. It was a time when Sir Desikachar was very physically active in the KYM. And so very quickly got involved, roped in. And then because I was young, no commitments, I wasn't married then. So I got roped into a lot of assignments because I could give the time. And I think from there it just began, and that's where I am. It's been a long journey. So moved through the publications department, started as a junior, went on to head the department, and then took over as head of studies in 2019.
Wow, that's wonderful, Nrithya ji, because first of all, it was a good overview of the diverse background that you have, and also I think it's safe to say that the reward of seva is more seva. Yes. Definitely. So that was very beautifully put by you. Thank you. You mentioned about your Guru Desikarji. So could you please share about your experiences learning directly from your Guru, and also some interesting experiences, if any?
See, with Sir, I don't think when I was, at least earlier on, he was a very simple man. So I don't think I even realized what a blessing it was to actually study under someone like that until much later. But when we were doing the teacher training, he would always be present. He'd come and go inside the mandiram, and we were working. I was very blessed because I could work with him directly on multiple publications projects and working on books on the Yoga Sutra. So I would edit, I would go to him, and then he would offer his corrections. So I was very lucky to be there. And I would say that as far as I was concerned, I mean, other people, everyone had a different experience of Sir. But with me, he was extremely encouraging. That's one thing I've always seen with Sir, was that he was very encouraging of women, specifically in yoga. And it was a matter of pride to him that so many of us, of the teachers and the faculty in the K1 were women. And he could see, what remains in my mind was his way of how very easily he could create a relationship with almost anyone, whether he knew them or not. He'd take a few minutes to understand their interests, and then somehow the conversation would weave around something that was linked to you. It could be a language that you shared, or it could be an interest, it could be music, it could be dance, and then he would try to rope that in the conversation. And also back then, the way the KY model worked was a little different. We had a structured teacher training course, but the therapist training course was pretty much it was like you were thrown into the ocean and you had to basically swim your way out. And see, that is how most of us learned, because now the K1 has a structured therapist training course. But back then, Sir would just, he'll walk in, he'll pull you up and he'll say, Nrithya, come here, I want you to meet someone. You have to teach this person this. My very first student, I remember, was a child, I think on the autism spectrum, with certain um, challenges, exceptionally intelligent, but also certain challenges. And I was in the midst of my diploma. He said, Nrithya, I want you to teach this young man. And he just hand over his suggestions. And so in many ways, he would guide us. When he said, you teach this, we would teach that, go back with the feedback. And then he'll say, you correct it. But again, there's also a lot of hesitation, you know, that how do you ask a teacher of his stature, why am I doing this? What should I do? But he was very encouraging. I was also very lucky in that sense that at that time, the K1 was attempting to generate some funds. So it was around 2004 for a building project. And I was asked by Sir to accompany his wife and a senior teacher of the Mandiram to go on a world tour. And so again, that was another remarkable learning experience, because for almost 3 months, Sir mentored us one-on-one every day. And so he would touch on every aspect, and he would expect you to have things at your fingertips. That I think all teachers at the KY under Sir, he'd have these public lectures every Saturday. You had to go prepared to be pulled up for anything. And so it could be, okay, now chant the 3rd chapter of the Yoga Sutra. Or he would say, explain Samadhi. You wouldn't know what he would say, but you had to be ready. And so literally that's how we have all learned. I think that was a remarkable way. He would correct where there was something wrong. He had a very gentle way of correcting. He wouldn't overtly insult anybody or put you down, but his very gentle approach, say something else you could have said, or what happened, why didn't you say anything? The way he spoke was that way, very gentle. He'd let you down very gently, but at the same time, he was a stickler for knowing certain things. There was no compromise, no negotiation, and time. That's something that I've learned with him, is that if he gave you an appointment at 8:30, 8:29, his door would open. And you had to be there. It would open. Until then, the door will be shut. His private office would be shut. 8:29, it would open. And you had to be there. And there was no question of, he would test us. He deliberately asked us to come at times when obviously you knew you could not go. And it was a test again to see our commitment, to see the Shraddha, whether we are able to be there. that was one thing. Again, what I've always admired with Sir was, if he had a student, whoever it was, it might be a VIP, it might be the DGP of the police, it might be someone, because he had people from all walks of life, or he would have people like us who were learning with him. Whoever it was, he'd walk you to the gate. He'll come out with us, wait at the gate, send you off, and then he'll go in. And I think that's remarkable in a teacher, to come and welcome someone and to leave them outside at the gate. Who does these things? And another thing that in my experience stands in my memory of Sir is what we speak of as aparigraha. It's very simple. He would always be dressed in a white shirt, white dhoti, one pen in his pocket, nothing else. And he would accept nothing for himself. I have seen him, because students across the world would bring him things, whether they were chocolates or watches or fancy pens. He would take it because it should not to hurt the sentiment of the giver, but the very next person who he met, it would be given to. And everyone knew that. Everyone knew that, whether it was a fruit, or some days it might even be a loaf of bread. So there was nothing, there was no, again, that, that samadrishti. You have to give something. So he would never send us empty-handed when we left. So these are some remarkable experiences that I've had. Personally in my life, I was very lucky, because Sir was at my wedding. He blessed me after the birth of my daughter. He came home and he chanted for her. So those are the things that I count as extremely precious. And as I say, I was very lucky. I was young. I didn't have any other, issues or challenges that some of my colleagues might have faced. And so I was present wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And he was very encouraging. He never dismissed me as a, oh, she's just young, she doesn't know anything. He would always make an attempt to explain, to ask. And another very endearing quality about him, in his pocket, he would keep kalkanda, those diamond candy, sugar candy, and a few raisins. It would always be there. And so when he'd walk through the cave, and he'll say, Indama, and he'll give you just two or three of those. And it was very endearing, because he would frequently swallow those diamond candy just to clear his throat, and he'd give you one or two of that. These are some lovely memories that I have, that I greatly cherish, because it was a little over a decade that I was able to see him, interact with him, work with him very closely, and very blessed part of my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the acharyas, the sangha of acharyas and our gurus is so enriching because of the compassion they have and they exude. Wonderful. It was a very beautiful account of your experiences with your guru. Very happy and touching to hear them. Could you now please share with us, how has the knowledge of yoga enriched your life overall?
How has the knowledge of yoga enriched my life, is it?
Yes.
I would say in many ways, everything came together. What started off as a journey in dance did not stop merely as a performing art. That I have to give credit to my Natyacharya, because she would insist that we understood the bhava of the composer, and that is how, because I'm not a native Telugu speaker or a Kannada speaker. I speak Tamil, I know Hindi, I know Sanskritam, but she would insist that you know the words, you know the meaning, you know the state of mind in which the composition was written. I think somewhere those seeds started then to seek. And over time, some of it was also built up from my early education. My latter day education was in Vidya Mandir in Mylapore. After I left the KFI, again, everywhere there was an environment that was conducive for study, for learning. And I would say with my journey, with my study of both Vedic chanting as well as yoga, because again there Krishnamacharya was unique in the sense that contrary to convention, he believed and he did encourage women or others who are truly interested to chant. And he said, by his standpoint, he was a Vedanta. There was absolutely no doubt of his Vidvatvam, of his Pandityam. And from a position of strength, he stood by that decision. He said, this is Apat Dharma. And when the Vedic Dharma itself is in danger of being lost, then it has to be preserved, but you have to do it with the right Shraddha. The Shraddha is important, the sincerity is important, compliance with niyamas is important. So I would say the study of the chants themselves made a difference, because learning Vedic chanting, to be able to chant, made a difference. And then my journey into philosophy, the Yoga Sutra specifically, because I had a chance to study several times with different senior teachers of the Mandram, and then later with Sir as well. And the kind of what it opened up in terms of Indian psychology, and how Indian traditions view the mind, and how much relevance there is to understanding the mind and to being operative in our life. I think that changed a lot, specifically Deskachar's Heart of Yoga. It's one of his, I think till now, one of the best-selling books on yoga, where again, with Sir, his very unique capacity was that he could distill the essence of these ancient teachings and yet give it to different seekers in a way that was appropriate for them at that bhumi. And so while the teachings would be very profound, sometimes they would be delivered very simply for you to grasp it, and then later you'd reflect, and then you'd realize what it meant. Now that journey took me a long time, but the more and more I went into the Yoga Sutra, the more it opened for me, because I realized the connections that we see, and from there it drove me to look at other texts and develop an interest in looking at commentaries, into going deeper into Samskrita, into the nuances of the language. And so I would say in many ways that study of philosophy opened up everything and brought me to seeing the truth of that philosophy embodied in our life, embodied in a traditional wisdom, in the cultural practices of Bharata. I think all of those were little windows that opened, and today I see it coming together, where we try to weave, because an asana is not just an asana. A movement is not just an exercise. There is an integration of prana, of the sharira, of the indriyas, of the manas, and there is a psychological, often even spiritual consequence of doing certain things in a certain way. And so I think it all comes together very beautifully. From my perspective, that is where I am today.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, the arts, the philosophy, the praxis, everything coming together and integrating at a central point is, I think, the beauty of our civilization as well. And
for me, I think it has also impacted my dance. It has changed my what I would say, looking into a text, going deep into subtext, and trying to bring out the philosophical import of a seemingly surface level statement. I think somewhere it has also triggered that shift in terms of how I look at a text and how I try to bring it out in choreography. So somewhere I think both have had mutual impacts on each other.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. You had also mentioned, as you were speaking, that how practice asana is not just a physical endeavor. There are multiple layers to it, even at a spiritual level. So could you please also share a little more on that? What is it? Why is yoga more a spiritual path? What is the philosophical basis of yoga practice?
See, this is something that I think is very important that practitioners of yoga understand, that yoga is a Vaidika darshana. Its origin is one of the other darshanas. It comes from the Vedic tradition only, very closely aligned with Sankhya. And as a philosophy, we see very clearly that its goal is Kaivalyam, as indicated by Patanjali in the text itself. It is a moksha shastra and shows a path to this liberation from the cycle of karma. And the means is to understand, to regulate, and then to eventually acquire the highest level of jnanam, so that even these limitations of the gunas can be transcended. This is its bigger context. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is that asana, the asana component alone, has been cherry-picked and taken out of its Ashtanga Yoga background, which is not wrong in the sense it's okay. Asana, yes, in the present times that we live in, given that our basic level where we are starting itself is much lower, given that we have so many liabilities, health issues, incapacities, then okay, yes, asana can take you to a certain point, but asana is not the goal. Even with Krishnamacharya's approach, both Krishnamacharya and Desikacharya, their life's work was making yoga accessible, and one way they did it was to adapt practices for therapeutic needs. And so in that, yes, we are working at a very physical, physiological level, possibly emotional, psychological as well. But the purpose of a yoga chikitsa intervention is not merely to teach asana, it is to help them to return, to come back to a certain state of health and wellness, so that the journey can continue. The journey seeking the purusharthas become fundamental. And so unless asana or any practice for that matter, unless it contributes to the development of sattva guna or the dominance of sattva guna over rajas and tamas, then that practice is futile. And so asana has to be viewed in its larger context, its larger historical as also its cultural context. I think this is extremely important, to view asana as a part of a larger canvas, because even in the Ashtanga yoga, yama and niyama come first. In terms of how Patanjali is giving you a hierarchy, he gives the most importance to yama, because this is fundamental understanding of social behavior. What should I do? How do I engage in such a way that my balance of mind is assured? As we see in the Gita as well, that samatvam, to be anchored in a point of stability, of neutrality, and to engage from that point without being flustered, without being overly ecstatic about happy events, without overly grieving unhappy events, to function from a point of neutrality. And that quality of titiksha, as Krishna tells in the Gita, it says all your experiences are coming because of matra sparshastu kaunteya. He says it's coming from your contact with the sensory objects, and naturally it will change. Endure them, they will pass. Now, to get to that point, all this is important. Yama is important, niyama is important, then only asana comes. So while I'm not denying the importance, what has also happened is a very unhealthy obsession with asana. And then later this appropriation, I would say, of taking Hatha Yoga out of its Patanjala Yoga context, and therefore an argument that Hatha Yoga is only physical and that it leads only to a certain end, whereas very clearly indicated that Hatha Yoga is a path to Raja Yoga, that there is a merging, and that you can't separate. Finally, even in the Gita, the teaching is that Karma, Jnana, Bhakti, Raja Yoga, they all merge into forming one path to the final, depending on the nature of the seeker. So that larger vision, without that, unfortunately, another thing that is now happening is to locate yoga outside its Sanatana context, and to take it out of its Vedic origins, and therefore to associate it only with Buddhist practices. Now, the fact is that Buddhism also emerges in the same melting pot scenario, and Buddhism shares many points with Vedanta, with yoga. It also, there are points of divergence, whether it's the Bauddha tradition or Jaina tradition, or for that matter, even within the Vaidika Darshana tradition, there are points of convergence, points of divergence. And it doesn't make sense to appropriate to take yoga out of its Vedic context and then attach it to merely a Buddhist context. You have to see the whole. So these are the issues. And then from there, unnecessary speculation that yoga is only for the sannyasi. Now, that doesn't make sense, because the mind is a real entity for every one of us. That we need to deal with the mind is a very real problem. And unless that base level clarity, understanding the kleshas happens, how can you progress to the next level of refinement? And so whether one engages with yoga from the perspective of Kaivalyam or not, that is a different question. Maybe that door is not open to us because we are not yet ready. But at least at a preliminary level, if we can function without, say, dukkha, daurmanasya, angame, jayatva, shwasa, prashwasa, if without this we can function from a space of sukha, Saumanasya, Angasthiryam, Virga Sukshma Prana, you have a base. When your base is established, it contributes to better quality decision making. Our choices are better, they are healthy, they are well thought out. Their ramifications are also less likely to be harmful to self and others. And so, I think at that level, when you say yoga as a total practice, then it has a certain implications that cannot be denied. And to merely attribute it to asana is a very narrow, very myopic view. Unfortunately, that is the view that is endorsed to the point where when we get doctor referrals, someone says, practice yoga, the doctor will tell us, teach them meditation. Don't teach headstand. These are instructions that we get because people believe that yoga requires you to do these contortions, to stand on your head, etc. Now, neither is true. Meditation can't be taught to someone who's not ready at a psychological or an emotional level. At the same time, advanced asanas are also not going to be taught if your intervention is at a therapeutic level where we are working with bare minimum range of movement. And so these are misconceptions that are problematic and also adding to the mix in terms of confusion. And so there is a need for authenticity. There is a need for teacher training programs to base themselves on authentic history and evolution of yoga in the context of Bharatiya culture. Because otherwise you will take only that component, the physical component, not adequate. What is the point of standing on your head, executing a perfect, Vrikshasana, if there is no change at the emotional level, if there is no change within, then everything you do is futile. And so I think that sensitivity has to happen among teachers.
Wonderful. I mean, two things that I am able to take away from this is that it's the pursuit for life. It is having its effects on various layers and aspects of our own life. It's not like a 15-minute, 20-minute engagement in a day.
Yes.
And it is also not a faraway thing, something that I'm doing only if I realize it's for me. It's for every one of us. Spiritual, the spark of spirituality, the seeking is natural to every one of us. So thank you so much for bringing that across very beautifully, Nrithya ji. My next question would be, so you said how being established in Samatvam being the goal, and I see that being very important for the young generation and in the world we are heading towards and we are already inhabiting. So how can we introduce yoga to the next generation? How can parents be educated regarding the importance of yoga for their complete well-being?
See, this is a challenge. See, unless the parents are hooked into yoga, unless they develop an interest, the children are not going to do it. See, unfortunately, we are weighing yoga on the same scale that you will view a gym workout or a Pilates workout or a Zumba workout. It doesn't work that way. So I would say, first of all, for parents across the world is one thing. That, in fact, I would say there is some awareness, at least outside the world, outside India, of the importance of these practices and centering. But our parents should, first of all, believe it, first do it. Also, there has to be a reorientation, I would say, as far as Indian parents are concerned, to Sanatana culture. That increasingly we are in a space where we are hesitant to accept, hesitant to say that, yes, I am a practicing Sanatani. What is wrong in this? That these are very beautiful practices. They are not something to be dismissed as mere superstition. Why do we celebrate a Ganesha Chaturthi? Why do we celebrate a Navaratri? Why do we celebrate a Deepavali? The Deepavali is not merely eating sweets and wearing clothes. There is a tatparya behind the Deepavali, every festival. And so if we can first bring this back as a cultural, I would say, in a sense, I would say it's a revolution because we have lost these practices. Why is the Ganga Snana important? Why is it important in the Arunodayam time? Small things like this. This has to do with everything. Can we reclaim our sadhana? Because this is our fundamental grassroots wisdom that for various reasons we are letting go of, we are ashamed to hold on to. And there is a reason, there is a science, there is a lot of wisdom behind it. And so even before getting people to work or practice on yoga, I would say reorient, reclaim the sadhana, do it joyfully and do it with pride, because there is great strength in this. And I have realized that when this is again through my own experiences, that when that foundation is there, then these various questions, these existential questions, and this very perplexing situation of purpose of life, none of this occurs. Unfortunately, with the millennial generation, I'm seeing a lot of vulnerability. Everything is, I'm not saying it in a wrong sense, but they are extremes. They're constantly bouncing off two extremes of elation or agony. And unfortunately, I would say social media is adding to this, because our world is shrinking to that lens. In fact, a friend of mine, someone that I know whom we are collaborating with, he said that we did a survey where a group of say about 1,000, 3,000 people were interviewed about, what is their friends network like, and they say that, oh, I have 100 friends, 1,000 friends, where on social media. And then the next question, how many will come to you and stand by your side in a moment of time, when a moment of need? And it was shocking. He told me the results were really appalling, that in general, the majority could not name more than 5 who would stand by them, who would answer a phone call and leave everything and come beside you. This is the very, very sad state we are in. And therefore, I think a need again to reorient, to reclaim. And see, the problem is, unfortunately, while education is useful, that education also sometimes is serving as a deterrent. And so I think that impetus also needs to start from the top down, in terms of, I suppose the NEP, the new NEP is one step in that process, but it's going to take a long time to change those samskaras, where we start seeing beauty. The first step, I would say, is see the beauty that is around you, see the beauty in nature, see the beauty in our temples, see the beauty in our architecture, in everything, in the bronzes, the beauty in music, in art. Start developing that quality of being a rasika first, and then you find value. And so through that, little by little, learn to work with your body, see the body as a element of wonder. That's important, right? We are in times where body shaming is at a peak, but acceptance of what is, understanding how the body works, understanding the Tridosha Siddhanta of Ayurveda, Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and then why appropriate dinacharya is important, ratri charya is important, ritu charya is important. All these are, I would say, important target points. We have scattered them, we've broken them apart. If they start coming together in the minds, in the practices of our generations and the generations to come, then not just yoga, all these associated practices will also find a resurgence. So that, I think, is important. In Vedanta, we are seeing it to some extent. Yes, I know that the traditionalists feel that it's Neo-Vedanta, but at least there is an inclination, there is some interest. But I think that resurgence needs to occur across all these disciplines, in science, in maths, to go back to these systems and see them for what they are. I think that is needed.
Absolutely. And I think that is why the Grihastha Ashrama is considered to be one of, the bedrock of our civilization. And what happens there is very important for the entire civilization.
Absolutely. Because that is learning ground that like no other.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, when we speak of yoga and Vedanta, immediately the assumption is, oh, you have to be a sannyasi, you have to renounce everything. But our masters were not, they were grihasthas. Krishnamacharya was a grihastha. Absolutely. So many of the masters were grihasthas. They were there, they were established in a state of samatvam, and they did what they had to do. That is important for us to understand.
Definitely. Very well said. And thank you so much for that account, Nrithya ji. And now I will, my final question in this interview is, could you share some of the offerings in KYM, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram? What are the various offerings for the different age groups, for people who might be interested to take up any offering?
See, the vision of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram was essentially as a yoga therapy center. This was the large vision. As I said, Sir and Krishnamacharya's thought process very far-sighted in that yoga is a need of the hour and it offers a viable solution for people suffering from all manner of ailments, and it brings some amount of functionality to their lives. This was their vision. And so in 1976, KYN started off primarily as a yoga therapy center, but very soon after that, if someone has to be a yoga therapist, there has to be a supporting shastra, there has to be a knowledge base. And so a formalized structured teacher training program evolved very soon. Because until then, as I said, the teaching was in a very one-on-one manner, not structured as a course, but Sir would teach, depending on that day, there would be a topic. In fact, that's how many of us have also learned. He'd take up a different topic every day in the session, and then he would go through it. Over time, that changed, and we had a structured teacher training program. And so while our mainstay is still yoga therapy, the KYN sees our work is one-on-one. When it comes to yoga therapy interventions, the consultant meets the seeker, the care seeker, assesses the situation, the needs from different parameters, Kala, Desha, Vaya, Vritti, Shakti, Icha, many things that we factor in when we do a holistic assessment, and then a suitable course plan is designed and taught. Usually taught either by the consultant, or we might assign a teacher, a trained therapist who works with the care seeker one-on-one over a period of time. And so we create a relationship over a period of time. Those classes are not done daily. The intention is that you learn and you practice. You have to develop that spirit of independence so that the care seeker is led to practice and take the responsibility for his or her own empowerment. So therapy continues to be a major aspect. We do about 1,200 plus classes one-on-one every month. We have about 300, 350 new care seekers coming in month on month. And in support to this, there are all other activities. Over the decades, the Institute of Yoga Studies has become another significant functional area of the KYN. This is the training and certification wing of the KYN, where we offer close to 900-hour advanced intense teacher training program. So it's about almost 500 hours of lecture classroom work, plus another 400, 450 hours of personal study, assignments, project preparations, evaluations, etc. So it's a solid 900-hour course running over almost 22 months. We cover the Yoga Sutra, all 4 chapters of the Yoga Sutra, theory of asana, pranayama, dhyanam, course planning, classical techniques of asana, modifications of asana. So it's a very detailed course. We have allied subjects such as anatomy and physiology, Ayurveda, and psychology. All this comes together. They're also given a certain foundation in Indian culture and evolution of yoga. So these are some of the subjects. So it's a very intense study offered both at the national and international level. Building upon that is another 900-hour yoga therapist training program, where the first level equips a student to become a teacher of yoga, to teach preferably to groups or to healthy individuals. The yoga therapist training program builds on this foundation and works on the applications of yoga for all conditions. And there again, we bring in anatomy, physiology, pathology, also Ayurvedic interventions, and the role of psychology is trying to study Western psychology, Yoga Sutra, Bhagavad Gita as a model of counseling, the use of tools such as mantra, bhavana, Tirtha Yatra, Nyasam, many tools, Ahara, all these are also factored in. So those are our intense programs. The Department of Studies runs a number of other short-term courses. Now we've gone online. I think that is both a gift of, I would say in a sense, it's a gift of the pandemic that I didn't think was possible, because yoga you understand as a Guru Mukha Grahanam. It's an Anushasana Shastra where you're in the presence of the teacher. I think the pandemic broke our samskara, so now we have adapted to both hybrid online and offline models. So a lot of short-term courses, Yoga Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, Sankhya Karika, courses on chanting, because parallel to the Department of Studies, we have a Department of Healing Chants, where again there is a structured teacher training program. In the Krishnamacharya tradition, we are trained in the Krishna Yajurveda, and so some of the mantras that have been taught to us by our Acharya are brought into this, apart from which Bhagavad Gita chanting, Vishnu Sahasranama, some of the other stotras of Vedanta Deshika, this forms the curriculum. So both in studies and in chanting, we offer opportunity also for private learning, one-on-one learning online and offline. Apart from which, our other significant thrust area is Mitra, which is our community outreach program, where KVAN works with different NGOs, other organizations to provide free yoga training for the socially and economically underprivileged and also the disabled. So I think since our inception, Mitra began in 2001. Even before that, KVAN has been engaged in a lot of work with the children with special needs. Even way back in the 80s, there was a pioneering effort made by Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram under Sri Desikachar with Professor Jayachandran of Vijay Human Services in the early 80s, where yoga was a modality used to work with children with all manner of disabilities. It was a very successful project that later took shape as Mitra. And so over the years, I think KY Mitra has touched about over 1 million beneficiaries as on date. We've collaborated with over 250 NGOs. Many of those collaborations are still running, where our training is offered free to the recipient. There is also a research wing where some amount of work is being done on applied research on how yoga can work with different health conditions. And so these are our core thrust areas. Also, there is a media and publications department where we have a number of offerings. So these are the ways in which people can engage with the KY.
That's wonderful. And I think what makes it so holistic is the anchorage in the tradition, as you mentioned so rightly. And it was a very humbling experience for me, blessed opportunity to interview you, Nrithya ji. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation and an interview. Thank you so much. Thank you so much once again. And audience,
thank you so much, Srihari ji, and to Indica Moksha, as also to Nitin ji for this invitation. And I'm blessed. As I said when I began, I just count every blessing that sometimes we don't know how, we don't know why. There's this beautiful Tamil song, Yenna Tavam Seideno, about Yashoda. And often I wonder, what did you do to be here, to have received such abundance from the masters? Because as far as our teachers were concerned, there was no holding back. It was just open floodgates. Take what you can. If you go with a spoon, that's what you'll get. If you go with a bucket, that's what you'll get. And so I think it's been a transformative journey that, again, for me personally, I think that was Sir's impact, that while he was rooted in tradition, he had that compassion to view everyone from where they were. And that was his core teaching, that if I must end with it, that he'd say, don't judge someone, you haven't walked in their shoes. And so that ability to accept everything and to see it from their perspective and to adapt, that there are elements of the teachings that are always relevant, no matter what your background, no matter what your faith, no matter what your religion, that it is possible to practice traditions like yoga without getting boxed into all these little things that we put ourselves into. And so that again is something that was given to us by Sir, which is what I'm happy to have shared. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste. Audience, if you would like to stay updated and join us for more sessions such as these, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you. Shri Gurubhyo Namah.